I'm Gary Bembridge of Tips for Travelers. I'm going to share with you 6 critical tips if you're thinking of going on an Alaska cruise that will ensure that you have a phenomenal cruise. So first of all, when is the best time to go? Well, the Alaska season is relatively short. It runs from May to September, with May and September being the cheapest months to go. The peak season is June, July time, and it's also the time when you're likely to see the most wildlife. Now, the important thing to know about Alaska is assume when you go, no matter which month you go, is that it's going to rain. Now, May is probably your chance of having the least amount of rain, probably also September. So the peak of the season tends to have a lot of rain. And in the packing tips, I'll talk a little bit about how you deal with that. The second tip I have is around choosing your itinerary. There are 2 basic itineraries, the first of which is the Inside Passage, the second is the Gulf of Alaska. On an Inside Passage cruise, there are 4 main activities that you'll do. You'll call at Juneau, which is the capital of Alaska. It is the only capital in North America that you cannot reach by road. It's very much linked to the gold rush. You'll call it Skagway, which is the northernmost place that you can go and visit, which is a very small town, only has around about 900 people in winter, about 1,200 people in summer, and it was the gateway to the Klondike Gold Rush. You'll also visit Ketchikan, which used to be the salmon capital of the world, and you'll normally spend a day cruising through one of the glacier inlets like Glacier Bay. The pros of an Inside Passage cruise is it gives you a great overview of Alaska, and you'll get to see some of the really interesting and important places, and you'll get to see phenomenal scenery and great glaciers. The downside, it is a round trip and goes Vancouver to Vancouver or Seattle to Seattle. You double back on yourself, and so you have 2 days where you're actually just cruising through the Canadian Inside Passage, and so it is a little bit repetitive. Now, the other itinerary is the Gulf of Alaska cruises. They also tend to be one way, so they either go northwards or they go southwards, normally between Seattle or Vancouver in the south and Anchorage in the north. The pros of these is not only do they spend about 4 days in the Inside Passage, so you'll get to see similar things, but you'll also see much more. So you'll also get to see some other glaciers such as the Valdez or the Hubbard or the College Fjord. The downside is it probably means 2 flights. You're either going to fly into Seattle or Vancouver, and you're going to have to fly in or out of Anchorage as well, so there's more flying. So my third tip is, who should you go with? There's a huge amount of choice. There are normally in a season up to 29 ships doing Alaska, lots of different cruise lines. I went with Holland America Line. Now, the reason for Holland America Line is they are the company that has been operating in Alaska for longer than anybody else. They have been in Alaska for over 70 years. So one of my tips, though, when you decide on who to go with, is look at the cruise line, look at the ship, and make sure that particular itinerary is going to take you into Glacier Bay. Only 2 cruise ships are allowed per day into Glacier Bay. That's really, really important that you go into Glacier Bay because it is absolutely magnificent. But certainly I would recommend take a look at Holland America Line just because they have been going there for such a long time and are so knowledgeable. And also, very importantly, they can also get you into Glacier Bay. My 4th tip is around what cabin. One of the things I would recommend that you look at, if you can afford it, is getting a balcony cabin. The scenery is quite remarkable in Alaska. Even just cruising along on sea days, it's beautiful scenery. So actually having a balcony cabin is pretty magnificent. So which side of the ship should you be on? If you're on a Gulf of Alaska trip, as you head northbound, you should actually be on the starboard side or the right-hand side of the ship, because the scenery is all going to be on the right-hand side of the ship. If you're heading southbound, be on the port side or the left-hand side of the ship, because all the scenery is going to be on the left-hand side. If you're doing an Inside Passage, it's probably less critical. However, I was on the port side, the left-hand side, and certainly in Glacier Bay, that was a real plus, being on the port side. As you cruise through Glacier Bay, the way that the ship's positioned, for much of the time, the really important glaciers you want to look at are going to be on the left-hand side or the port side. So in terms of packing, think of layers. First of all, you start with your comfort layer. So this is a t-shirt or an undershirt and comfortable trousers like a pair of jeans. Secondly, what you need is your warmth layer. So a sweater, sweatshirt, or all-weather kind of puffy coat, a nice woolen hat, scarf or a neck warmer, some nice thick socks. Pack some long johns, particularly if you go into glaciers. Third, you have your protection layer, some sort of raincoat, ideally with a hood or poncho with hood. Also, what I strongly recommend is your protection layer, particularly if you're going to be outdoors doing hiking or going to glaciers, is some waterproof over trousers. Make sure that you have waterproof gloves. Now, what some people have recommended is actually having undergloves, which are texting gloves. So gloves that will enable you to use your mobile phone or to manipulate your camera if you want to take pictures. Bring sunglasses, particularly if you're going onto things like glaciers or snowy areas. In terms of shoes, what I recommend is make sure that you take leather shoes, because it's going to be wet, they're going to get wet. And obviously if you have some kind of canvas shoe or other shoe, that's going to be a real problem. Obviously if they've got more of a hiking spin to them, that's good. So they've got a bit of ankle protection, that's really good if you're out hiking or walking. If you go onto the glaciers, you will be given over boots to put over whatever types of shoes that you're wearing. Now my sixth tip is a really important one, and one unfortunately that is probably going to blow your budget. There are some phenomenal excursions and things to do. However, it could end up costing you quite a lot of money. There are basically 5 main types of excursions. Whale watching, really popular. Glacier-based excursions, whether that's just going and viewing them, walking on them, going dog sleighing on them. Activity-based excursions, so things like zip lining, kayaking, hiking, eating and drinking, going to salmon bakes or touring local breweries. And then there are cultural immersion ones where you get to experience some of the Alaskan culture. If you really want to see things like glaciers, whale watching, there is quite a hefty cost associated with many of those. But I would strongly recommend do try and budget to do one glacier excursion and perhaps one other excursion which is going to be memorable, unique and distinctive in Alaska. So for example, in Juneau, although you can do this in some of the other ports, dog sleighing, you can do them on the Mendenhall Glacier or you can do them on the Norris Glacier, but they can cost anything up to $650 per person. Getting onto glacier, either hiking or doing dog sleighing, is a thing that you will never forget. Another thing I would strongly recommend you do in Skagway is go on the White Pass and Yukon Railway. This is a very historic railway. It's a narrow gauge railway that was built in the 1900s. You can do it in standard carriages or you can also do it in premium carriages. And that's going to cost you between $120 right up to about $320. In Ketchikan, I would recommend you go to the Great Alaskan Lumberjack Show. That's going to cost you about $35, $40. There are, of course, many other things that you can do in Alaska which are going to cost you much less money. You'll find in some of the ports there are trolley tours. You'll find there are either just simple walking tours you can do, or in Juneau you can go out the Mount Roberts Tramway, which is not going to cost you very much money. So what are your options? You can obviously go with the cruise line, one of the options that many people will go with because they know that if any of the tours are running late, the ship will wait for you. There are independent providers which will also offer excursions. Often many of the same excursions or very similar excursions. They will tend to be a lower cost. They will meet you at the port and they do promise to help sort you out if anything runs late and they don't get you back to the ship on time. Of course, you can simply go and self-explore. A lot of these towns are quite close to where the ship's dock. You can then just get off. You'll find there are local tour operators offering similar tours, often at a lower cost. Do bear in mind that dream excursion may get cancelled because of poor weather. Normally not because of rain. A lot of these Alaskan and Alaska tours are used to rain. It's if there's more things like fog, they may get cancelled because it's not safe to fly. So those things hopefully will help you have an incredible Alaskan cruise. Certainly those tips are things that I learned through my experience, and definitely knowing those before I went would have made my cruise even better. The Alaska experience is phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. I'm glad that I budgeted for and planned on doing some of those magical excursions because they did make the experience just quite incredible. If you enjoyed this video, please watch many more of my Tips for Travelers videos because I have many more videos with tips about Alaska and lots of other traveling inspiration, advice and tips.